When we gather to speak of the secret language between souls, we touch upon a mystery older than civilization, a mystery that trembles in the depths of the unconscious. Tonight, I will speak to you, not as a scholar dissecting abstractions, but as a traveler of the psyche who has stood at the threshold of dreams, who has seen the symbols that burn like constellations in the night of the soul. The theme before us is unsettling, what the narcissist fears most. But do not imagine this fear is trivial, for the narcissist is not merely a person of vanity. He is an archetype, a figure woven into the collective psyche of humanity. His image reflects the ancient myth of Narcissus gazing into the water, bewitched by his own reflection, forever separated from the living world. The narcissist represents the captivity of the self within the mirror, a prison of endless repetition where no true encounter with the other is possible. Yet the figure he dreads most is the empath who finally learns his language. The empath, as you know, is often born out of a wound. It is not a glamorous gift, as some may imagine, but the mark of a soul that has felt deeply, sometimes too deeply, and has been shaped by an environment where survival demanded the subtle reading of moods, gestures, and unspoken energies. The empath is like the child who grew up listening for the footsteps of a volatile parent, scanning the room for the tremor of an emotion that might erupt into chaos. In this way, empathy is not only a gift, it is also a scar. It is the scar that grants vision, the wound that opens the ear of the heart, and here lies the paradox. What was born in trauma becomes, when integrated, the very key to freedom. But when the empath learns the language of the narcissist, the drama changes. For long has the empath been the prey, offering compassion to the insatiable hunger of the narcissistic shadow. Long has the empath mistaken exploitation for intimacy, thinking that to carry another's pain is to love them. The empath has lived like Chiron, the wounded healer, carrying wounds that do not belong to him, confusing sacrifice with devotion. Yet there comes a moment, an alchemical turning, when the empath awakens. This awakening is not a shout, but a quiet clarity, as if a fog has lifted and the true forms of things appear. The empath sees the pattern, sees the repetition, and whispers within, I know this language now. What is this language? It is the language of shadow projection. The narcissist survives by projecting his unendurable emptiness upon others, feeding upon the reflected glow of their energy. He speaks in the dialect of manipulation, alternating between idealization and devaluation, between seduction and rejection, like the shifting masks of an actor who fears his own naked face. This language is not spoken with words alone, but with silences, gestures, absences, and sudden storms of attention or withdrawal. It is a language designed to disorient, to keep the other in a state of longing and confusion, and the empath, sensitive to every nuance, has long been the perfect listener, the ideal mirror, until he learns. To learn the narcissist's language does not mean to imitate it, but to decode it, to see that behind the grandiosity lies a hollow core, a child never met with true love, to recognize that what appears as cruelty is, in truth, terror of intimacy, to know that the manipulations are not evidence of power, but of desperation. When the empath learns this, he ceases to be ensnared. He looks into the performance and sees the trembling actor behind the mask, and this is what the narcissist fears, to be seen, for his entire existence is built upon the illusion that his mask is real, that his reflection in the water is substance. When the empath sees through it, the spell is broken. But this is not merely psychology, it is alchemy. In dreams, I have seen the narcissist as a figure in a hall of mirrors, surrounded by infinite reflections of himself, unable to distinguish which one is real. I have seen the empath in those dreams as a lantern bearer, carrying a small flame that reveals the emptiness behind the glass. This image is archetypal. The empath carries the light of the self, which is the wholeness of the psyche. The narcissist fears this light because it dissolves the enchantment of the false self. It demands authenticity, and authenticity to him is unbearable, for it would expose his wounds and demand his transformation. The empath who learns this language becomes dangerous not because he attacks, but because he no longer consents to the unconscious pact. He no longer offers his life force to sustain the narcissist's illusion. He no longer mistakes chaos for passion, nor control for care. He sees, and seeing is a beginning of liberation. To see the narcissist is to withdraw from his spell, and to withdraw is to confront the emptiness within oneself that had once accepted his dominion. For let us be honest, the empath is not purely innocent. The empath too has colluded, has allowed the drama to continue, driven by an unconscious need to heal what could not be healed in the past. The empath's compassion was often a secret plea to rewrite his own wound. Thus, the awakening is twofold: to see the narcissist clearly and to see one's own shadow reflected in that dance. Imagine with me a dream. A woman walks into a vast cathedral where the mirrors are taller than the pillars. She sees her lover in every reflection, smiling, reaching for her, promising devotion. But as she steps closer, each mirror fractures, and behind the glass she sees not him, but a child weeping alone in the dark. She awakens trembling, for she realizes that she has been in love not with a man, but with his mask, and that her devotion has been offered to a ghost. This dream is not a condemnation, it is an initiation. To awaken is painful, but it is also the birth of truth, and the truth sets her free. The empath's liberation terrifies the narcissist, because it disrupts the economy of energy upon which his false self depends. He thrives only when others mirror him, adore him, or suffer under his control. When the empath steps out of the role, the narcissist is confronted with silence. Silence is unbearable to him, for in silence he hears the echo of his own emptiness. He may rage, he may seduce, he may play the victim, but all these are masks. When they no longer work, he is left naked before the void, and though he may not admit it, this is his deepest fear, that without manipulation, he will cease to exist in the eyes of another, and without those eyes, he will be no one to be. No one is to encounter death, the death of the false self. And so he fears the empath who has learned to see, but let us not linger in condemnation. The narcissist is not a monster, but a symbol. He is an extreme manifestation of a universal human tendency, the refusal to face the shadow. Each of us has a narcissist within, a fragment that longs to be adored, that fears rejection, that resists vulnerability. The outer narcissist is often the projection of our own disowned hunger for recognition. Thus, when we speak of what the narcissist fears, we must also speak of what we fear: the exposure of our own emptiness, the demand to step into authenticity. And when the empath learns the language of the narcissist, he also learns the language of his own wound. He sees that his excessive giving was not pure love, but a strategy of survival, a way of being indispensable so as not to be abandoned. This recognition is the beginning of individuation. Individuation, as I have long taught, is the journey toward wholeness. It is not the pursuit of perfection, but the integration of opposites. For the empath, individuation means integrating strength with compassion, boundary with openness, selfhood with care for others. It means no longer being defined by the wounds of the past, but by the fullness of the self. When the empath embodies this, he becomes not merely a healer of others, but a healer of himself. And in this transformation, the dance with the narcissist ends, for the drama no longer has fuel. What was once a battlefield becomes a mirror for self-realization. Do you see how the archetypes intertwine? The narcissist is the mask, the persona carried to its extreme, while the empath is the shadow bearer, carrying wounds unspoken. When the empath learns the narcissist's language, he becomes the reconciler, the one who unites mask and shadow, illusion and truth. This union is not achieved by fighting the narcissist, but by transcending the game. And in transcending, he frightens the narcissist, for he reveals that the drama was never real. It was always a play staged by the unconscious. The empath who awakens ceases to be an actor and becomes the witness, and the witness is aligned with the self. Perhaps you ask, what does this mean for your life? It means that if you have loved a narcissist, you have been initiated into a profound alchemy. You have been invited to see through the illusions of the ego, to awaken to the patterns that once enslaved you. Do not despise your wound, for it has given you sight. Do not despise your compassion, for it is the flame that makes you human. But know this, your compassion was never meant to be consumed by another's emptiness. It was meant to lead you into the mystery of your own wholeness. And when you see this, you stand no longer as prey, but as participant in the great unfolding of the soul. When the empath finally learns to see the narcissist clearly, there arises a great silence within. It is the silence of disillusionment, but also the silence of revelation. For so long, the empath had lived in a spell, as if life itself demanded endless sacrifice, as if love were only true when it demanded pain. This is the illusion woven by the unconscious, the archetype of the savior bound to the wounded, the healer bound to the one who cannot be healed. But when the veil is lifted, the silence reveals something profound, that the drama was never the ultimate truth of love, but only its counterfeit. In this moment, the empath feels both the grief of what was lost and the awe of what is gained. It is like stepping out of a labyrinth and realizing that the walls were built not by fate, but by the psyche itself. The narcissist, sensing this transformation, trembles, for he knows instinctively that he has lost his mirror. His strategies, once so effective, begin to falter. The empath does not react as before, does not rush to appease, does not collapse under blame. Instead, the empath looks back with calm eyes, eyes that no longer hunger for validation. And in this gaze, the narcissist feels naked, as though the persona he so carefully constructed is transparent. What he fears most has come to pass. He has been seen not as he wishes to be, but as he is, and to be seen is unbearable, for it calls forth the shadow, the unacknowledged emptiness within him. But do not think this fear is trivial, it is existential. For the narcissist's entire sense of identity is sustained by external reflection. Without it, he falls into the abyss of the void. This is why he resists intimacy, why he sabotages genuine love. Intimacy threatens to expose the inner hollowness. He longs to be adored, but he fears to be known. And so the empath who finally sees him, who finally speaks the unspoken truth, represents the very death of his illusion. This is not the death of the body, but of the false self, and to the ego there is no greater terror. Yet here lies the paradox. The empath's awakening does not destroy the narcissist. It offers him the only chance for redemption, for when the mask cracks, the possibility of authenticity appears, but rarely does he take it, for the terror of vulnerability is too great. Instead, he flees, he rages, he seeks another mirror. And so the empath's role is not to rescue, but to release. The empath's liberation comes in recognizing that healing the narcissist is not his task. His task is to heal himself, to withdraw the projection of his own wound, to reclaim the energy that had been poured into a bottomless well. Only then does he stand as an individual, not defined by another's emptiness, but by the fullness of his own soul. This confrontation brings us to the heart of Jungian psychology, the shadow. The narcissist's shadow is obvious emptiness, fear of intimacy, manipulation. But the empath's shadow is more subtle. It lies in his compulsion to give, his inability to set boundaries, his secret belief that he must earn love through sacrifice. This belief, too, is born of trauma. Somewhere in his early life, he learned that love was conditional, that his value depended on anticipating the needs of others. Thus he became hyper-attuned, sensitive, compassionate, but also dependent upon being needed. This is the hidden collusion between empaths and narcissists. Each uses the other to replay an old story. The narcissist reenacts his fear of abandonment, and the empath reenacts his need to be indispensable. Both are bound by the past, and both must awaken to be free. Consider the dream of a man who once came to me. He dreamed he was standing on a stage, performing tirelessly before an invisible audience. His arms ached, his voice broke, but he could not stop, for he felt that if he did, the audience would vanish and he would be abandoned in darkness. Suddenly, he turned toward the wings of the stage and saw a child seated alone, weeping. The child whispered, "Why do you perform for ghosts? See me." The man awoke in tears, for he realized that he had spent his life performing for the approval of others while neglecting the wounded child within himself. This dream is not only his, it belongs to all empaths. The compulsion to serve others often hides the neglect of one's own soul. And this is why the empath who learns the narcissist's language frightens him so deeply. Because to learn that language is to withdraw from the performance. The empath ceases to play the role of rescuer, ceases to be hypnotized by the narcissist's endless demands. He steps off the stage, turns toward his own inner child, and offers love where it was once denied. This act of self-love is revolutionary. It is the end of the spell, and in this end, a new beginning arises. The birth of authenticity. The empath begins to live not as a reflection of another's need, but as an embodiment of his own self. The self, as I have always taught, is the central archetype of wholeness. It is the divine spark within the psyche, the source of meaning and integration. When the empath turns toward the self, he no longer fears solitude, for solitude becomes communion with the inner depths. He no longer fears rejection, for he is anchored in something deeper than approval. He no longer seeks to rescue the unrescuable, for he has found the true object of healing, his own soul. This is individuation, the becoming of who one truly is, beyond roles, beyond masks, beyond the compulsions of the past. Yet do not imagine this journey is easy. To awaken is to grieve. The empath must grieve the years spent in bondage, the love poured into a void, the illusions cherished as truth. He must grieve not only the narcissist, but the part of himself that colluded in the drama. This grief is holy, for it purifies. It is the baptism of the soul into authenticity. Without grief, there is no transformation. Only by weeping does the heart wash itself clean of illusions. Only by mourning the false can one embrace the real. And so I say to you, if you have loved a narcissist, do not despise yourself. See it as a rite of initiation. You were drawn into that drama not by weakness, but by destiny. The destiny to confront your shadow, to awaken your empathy to its higher purpose. Empathy without boundaries is self-destruction. But empathy integrated with wisdom is divine sight. The empath who has awakened becomes a seer, a bearer of light, not because he rescues others, but because he embodies truth. His compassion is no longer driven by fear, but by freedom. He loves not to be needed, but because love is his nature, and this love is untouchable, for it is rooted in the self, not in the approval of another. The narcissist fears this more than anything, for when confronted with such love, love that is free, love that is not enslaved, his strategies collapse. He cannot manipulate what does not crave his approval. He cannot dominate what does not fear his rejection. He cannot seduce what already knows its worth. In the presence of an awakened empath, the narcissist stands powerless, for the very ground of his illusion has been removed. This is why he fears you when you learn his language, because you no longer speak it as a victim, but as a witness, and the witness is aligned with the truth, and truth is stronger than illusion. There is in this transformation an echo of myth. Think of Persephone, stolen into the underworld by Hades, forced to eat the pomegranate seeds that bound her to the realm of shadows. At first, she was a captive, a victim, but over time, she became queen of the underworld, sovereign of that very realm. The empath's journey is the same. At first, he is dragged into the underworld of the narcissist psyche, bound by the seeds of trauma, but when he learns the language, when he integrates his own shadow, he becomes sovereign of that realm. He is no longer prisoner, but ruler. And this sovereignty terrifies the narcissist, for it reveals that what he thought was his kingdom was never his. It belonged to illusion. The true sovereignty is always within the one who awakens. So, my friends, do not fear the confrontation with the narcissist. Fear instead the temptation to remain asleep, to remain bound by the old patterns. For awakening is painful, yes, but it is the only path to freedom. And freedom is not the absence of pain, but the presence of wholeness. It is the state of being in which you are no longer enslaved by the projections of others, nor by your own compulsions. It is the state of being in which you can look into the eyes of illusion and say, I see you, and I am no longer deceived. This is the language the empath must learn, the language of truth. And once spoken, it cannot be silenced. What is it then to embody the language of the narcissist and yet not be consumed by it? It is to recognize illusion without entering into its spell, to hear manipulation without responding with the old reflex of appeasement, to stand in the presence of shadow without collapsing into fear. This stance is not born of cold detachment, nor of cynicism, but of integration. The empath who has walked through the labyrinths has learned the symbols carved into its walls, has touched the stones of deception with his own hands, and now knows them by heart. He cannot be fooled, for the illusion no longer dazzles him. This knowing is the silent weapon, and it is what the narcissist fears above all else, for the awakened empath mirrors not the ego, but the self, and to stand before the self is to be summoned into transformation, whether one desires it or not. This confrontation is archetypal. In the language of myth, it is the meeting of light bearer and shadow dweller, of truth and illusion, of wholeness and fragmentation. In alchemical terms, it is the encounter of Sol and Luna, the king and the queen, whose union brings forth the philosopher's stone. But this union is not of persons, it is of energies within the psyche. The empath and the narcissist are externalized figures of an inner polarity. Each of us carries within both the hunger for validation and the longing for authentic connection, both the mask and the wound, both the manipulator and the healer. To see the narcissist without and to see him within are one and the same. The empath's awakening, therefore, is not merely the liberation from another, but the liberation from one's own inner tyrant, the inner narcissist who has demanded endless performance, endless sacrifice, endless denial of self. I have seen this truth in the dreams of countless souls. A man once dreamed he was locked in a ballroom where masked dancers twirled endlessly. Each dancer approached him, offering him a mask to wear. At first he refused, but eventually, exhausted, he placed one upon his face and joined the dance. Hours passed, days passed, perhaps years, until finally he caught sight of himself in a mirror. He saw not a dancer, but a hollow figure, a puppet whose strings were pulled by invisible hands. Terrified, he tore off the mask and the entire ballroom vanished, leaving him standing alone in a vast forest beneath the stars. He woke weeping, but also free. This dream reveals the truth, that to wear the mask of false love is to lose oneself, but to tear it away is to return to the living cosmos, where the soul can once again breathe. The empath who awakens embodies this tearing away. He no longer wears the mask that says, "I am here only to serve you, to heal you, to bear your pain." Instead, he stands barefaced, vulnerable, and yet powerful. His vulnerability is his strength, for it is rooted in truth, not in performance. He can say no without guilt. He can withdraw without fear. He can love without losing himself. This authenticity is what the narcissist cannot bear, for it demands reciprocity. To meet an authentic soul is to be invited into authenticity, and for the one who has lived behind masks, Suchinvitation feels like death. Here we touch upon a spiritual dimension, for the self is not only psychological, it is numinous, divine. It is the God image within the Imago Dei, the archetype of wholeness. To awaken to the self is to awaken to the presence of God moving through the soul, summoning it to become whole. The empath, in discovering this, ceases to idolize the narcissist, ceases to make of him a false god who must be appeased. He turns instead toward the inner flame, and in that flame he finds all that he once sought in others: security, worth, belonging, love. This turning is worship in its truest form, for it is the honoring of the divine spark within. The narcissist fears this because he can no longer play God in the life of the empath. His illusion collapses before the true light. But let me warn you, this path is not without danger. The empath, upon awakening, may be tempted to wield his new knowledge as a weapon of superiority, to look down upon the narcissist with contempt. This, too, is a trap, for it is but another mask. To awaken is not to become arrogant, but to become humble in truth. It is to see clearly, without judgment, that the narcissist is enslaved to his own shadow. Just as the empath once was, compassion remains, but it is a different compassion, no longer self-sacrificing, but discerning, no longer bound by compulsion, but free. It is the compassion that sees suffering without surrendering one's soul to it. This compassion is stronger than any manipulation, for it does not depend upon illusion. What then becomes of the empath who has walked this path? He becomes a teacher, though not always with words. His very presence teaches, for it radiates authenticity. He becomes like the tree that stands firm in the storm, offering shelter without demanding sacrifice. Those who come near him feel the solidity of his boundaries and the warmth of his compassion, and they sense something sacred, that here is a soul who cannot be bought, cannot be deceived, cannot be enslaved. And this is precisely why he frightens the narcissist, because he is free, and freedom cannot be controlled. Freedom is the final word. The empath's awakening is not merely psychological healing, but liberation of the spirit. It is the breaking of chains forged in childhood, chains of conditional love, chains of self-betrayal. It is the reclaiming of one's destiny, the recognition that one was never born to be a servant of illusion, but to be a bearer of truth. And this truth does not isolate, it unites. For when one lives authentically, one attracts others who live authentically. False relationships fall away. True ones emerge. The dance of manipulation ends, and the dance of wholeness begins. This is the promise of individuation, that in becoming whole, one finds one's true place in the great web of being. Perhaps you feel the stirring of this within you. Perhaps you, too, have loved a narcissist, have given until you were empty, have woken in the night with the weight of another's shadow pressing upon your chest. If so, hear me. Your suffering was not meaningless. It was an initiation into depth, an initiation into the mystery of the psyche. You were not destroyed. you were prepared, and now you stand at the threshold of freedom. The language you have learned, the patterns you have seen, are not curses but gifts. They are the wisdom that allows you to walk in truth. Take them, honor them, and step into the sovereignty of your own soul. The narcissist will tremble at this, for he senses that he no longer holds sway over you. He may rage, he may plead, he may vanish, but none of this matters, for you are no longer bound. You are no longer the child listening at the door for footsteps, no longer the healer, begging for love through sacrifice. You are the adult soul, the sovereign, the one who walks with the self, and in this truth, nor illusion can enslave you again. This is the secret the narcissist fears, not your anger, not your withdrawal, but your freedom, for in your freedom is the mirror of his chains, and he cannot bear to look. And now, as we near the heart of this meditation, let us speak of the deeper mystery, the alchemy that occurs when the empath does not merely escape the narcissist, but integrates the entire drama into the tapestry of the soul. For escape alone is not enough. To flee the shadow is still to be bound to it by fear. True liberation comes when one turns, gazes into the darkness, and says, "You too are part of me." This is the essence of individuation, not the denial of the shadow, but its transfiguration. You must understand, the narcissist outside is but a mirror of the narcissist within, that inner figure who craves approval, who fears rejection, who would rather wear a mask than reveal his wounds. He is alive in each of us. The empath who has awakened knows this. He no longer wastes his energy fighting phantoms in the world, for he has recognized their true dwelling place, the depths of his own psyche. To integrate the narcissist within is to look upon that wounded child, terrified of abandonment, and embrace him with a compassion once squandered upon others. It is to say, "I see you. You no longer need to manipulate. You no longer need to hide. You are loved." And in that embrace, the inner tyrant softens, the hunger quiets, the compulsion dissolves. What was once a predator becomes a child of the soul, reintegrated into the wholeness of being. This is why the narcissist fears the empath who has learned his language, because such an empath carries the medicine of integration. His presence alone exposes the hollowness of manipulation, not with accusation, but with being. He has no need to defend, no need to prove, no need to collapse. He simply is, and this isness calls forth the truth in everyone around him. The narcissist, faced with such presence, feels a trembling of his own false self. He may flee, he may attack, he may wither into silence, but he cannot remain unchanged, for the awakened empath carries the self, and the self is contagious. It awakens what is sleeping, even in those who resist it. I have often seen this in the symbolic world of dreams. A woman once brought me a dream in which she stood at the shore of a dark sea. From the waters rose a figure cloaked in shadow, whose face was ever changing, shifting from one identity to another. The figure demanded that she follow him into the depths, promising treasures, but offering only fear. For many nights she ran, but in one dream she turned. Instead of fleeing, she stepped into the sea, walked toward the shadowed figure, and said, "I know your name." At that moment, the figure dissolved into light, and the sea turned clear as crystal. She awoke, transformed, for she realized she had faced the archetype of the manipulator within herself, and by naming it, she had taken away its power. This is the power of language, not the words spoken aloud, but the inner knowing that names the shadow without fear. To know the language of the narcissist is not to master his tricks, but to see through them. It is to translate manipulation into its true meaning, a cry for control born of terror. It is to translate cruelty into its essence, the defense of a wound too fragile to expose. It is to translate seduction into what it hides, the longing to be seen as worthy. Once translated, the spell is broken. Illusion cannot survive interpretation. This is why I have always said, dreams, when interpreted, release their hold. So too do narcissistic illusions, when understood, lose their power. The empath who carries this translation becomes immune to the spell, and immunity is what the narcissist fears most, for without the capacity to ensnare, his kingdom collapses. But let us ascend higher still, for there is yet a greater mystery. The empath who has walked this path becomes not merely healed, but transformed into an archetype of the wounded healer, the Chiron who heals not by curing others, but by embodying the integration of wound and wisdom. This figure belongs to the collective unconscious. It is present in shamans, in mystics, in visionaries. Throughout history, they all began as empaths wounded by life, attuned to suffering, drawn into the shadows of others. But through suffering, they descended into the underworld, learned the language of the dead, and returned bearing the light. This is your calling too. If you have walked this road, you are not condemned to remain the victim of the narcissist. You are initiated into the role of the healer of illusions, not the healer of the narcissist himself, but of humanity's collective entanglement with false selves. For is not our entire society riddled with narcissism? Do we not see it in the endless pursuit of image, in the worship of status, in the addiction to validation through the eyes of others? The narcissist is not only an individual, it is the spirit of an age, and the empath, awakened, becomes the antidote, the prophet who sees through the glitter of appearances and calls humanity back to authenticity. When you, as empath, learn this language, and you not only free yourself, you participate in the healing of the collective soul. You embody truth in a time of deception, wholeness in an age of fragmentation, and this is no small task. It is the work of a lifetime, perhaps of many lifetimes. The narcissist will continue to fear you He will continue to avoid your gaze, to reject your authenticity, to mock your freedom. But do not be deceived. His fear is testimony to your power. The very fact that illusion recoils before you is proof that you carry light, and light does not argue with darkness. It shines. Your task is not to destroy the narcissist, nor to convert him, but simply to stand in your truth, to embody the self so fully that illusion has no foothold. This embodiment is the true revolution, the transformation that no shadow can withstand. And so I say to you now, with the authority of one who has listened long to the voices of the unconscious, honor your wound, for it has been your teacher. Honor your compassion, for it has led you into depth. Honor your awakening, for it has given you sight. But above all, honor your freedom, for it is sacred. Do not squander it by returning to the chains of illusion. Do not betray it by sacrificing it upon the altar of another's emptiness. Live it fully, radiantly, unapologetically, for in your freedom lies the seed of humanity's healing. The journey is not linear, nor is it final. You will face temptations to return, to doubt, to question your strength. This is natural. Every hero faces the call to retreat. But remember this, once you have seen, you cannot unsee. Once you have spoken the language of truth, you cannot return to silence. The soul that has tasted authenticity will never again be satisfied with illusion. This hunger for truth is your compass, your guide, your flame in the darkness. Trust it, and it will lead you home. And what is home? It is not a place, nor a relationship, nor a state of comfort. It is the wholeness of the self. It is the union of shadow and light, wound and wisdom, mask and truth. It is the place where you no longer seek outside what can only be found within. It is the silence at the center of the psyche where God speaks in symbols and dreams. It is here that the empath rests, no longer prey, no longer resquare, but soul in communion with the eternal. And from this place, life becomes what it was always meant to be, not a performance, not the survival, but a revelation. So let the narcissist fear you, for his fear is his own confrontation with truth. But do not fear him, for he is only a symbol, a shadow cast upon the wall of the collective psyche. Walk past the wall, walk into the light, carry your freedom as a lantern, speak the language of truth, wherever illusion speaks its lies, and in so doing, you fulfill the deepest calling of the empath, to be not a mirror for another's emptiness, but a bearer of the self, a witness to the wholeness that dwells in every soul. This, then, is the final word. What the narcissist fears most is not your anger, not your departure, not your rejection. What he fears most is that you will awaken to who you truly are. For when you awaken, he no longer has power, and illusion no longer has dominion. You stand as a soul unbound, and in your freedom, you reveal the path for others to follow. And this revelation is unstoppable. It is the work of the self, the work of God moving in the depths of the human heart. Trust it, embody it, live it, and you will never again be deceived.